Okay, guys, because we have so many tonight, and we have to be out of here at,
Quarter of.
Quarter of, okay?
have
We need
to
to
be
get
good.
started as fast as possible. So you all know who Andrea and I are. We run Connecticut Book Festivals, we run the Writer Sneak Peeks, which are third Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at Milford, Norwalk, and New Haven respectively. And we're happy that you're here. Please keep bringing people. I'm gonna keep it short. Vance?
Yes.
Why don't you come on up?
All right.
Our first reader tonight is Vance, but Vance,
Yes.
come on over here. So I want to tell you guys about Vance real quick. Vance
Why don't you tell me first, so I'll know what you're
Vance
gonna
has
say.
moved from working on his novel to having it published. Vance, what was the name of your book?
Expected blows away.
Oh, does it look like that over there?
Down there?
Okay.
Wow.
Vance's novel came in today.
Yeah.
So in case you know, Andrea and I run a publishing company also, and Vance asked us to publish his book for him. Vance, this is your very first copy.
Fantastic.
You have two cases sitting right there.
And I was gonna talk to you guys tonight about
So,
publishing.
Vance, how much
Vance,
is your
hold
book?
it up, I wanna take a picture.
I'd like to buy the first copy.
Okay. Thank you.
Vance, turn around.
Vance, turn around. Andrea's,
Andrea, stay there. Oops. If I can find the
Yes,
camera on
wait a
my
second.
phone.
Okay, I got mine here.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
It's always exciting when you
Yes,
I'm
see
sorry.
your book
Your
published.
book's published.
Hold it up. Oh, well, go back, one more picture.
Cindy, did you take my pen?
No, I gave you back your pen, I had.
It's on the desk, red.
Oh,
Yeah,
no, that's
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 mine.
not mine. That's all right.
We'll find it.
Actually, well, that's all right.
We haven't been anywhere.
I need a signed copy. Huh? Oh, no, you're doing it now in front of everybody. I want someone to, this is going on film because I want this.
Oh, okay.
Put your book on
Okay.
the podium.
All right.
So-
Put your book on the podium. Sign your life away.
So Vance worked very hard on this, and it came out beautiful.
It's beautiful, the cover is beautiful, but the book itself is
The book itself is wonderful.
wonderful, because I read it
That's
before it
good.
went to the publisher.
Because we came out.
That's fine.
And is this the first autograph you've given?
Uh-huh.
For this book.
Oh, no, I had other books
Oh, okay.
published, so.
I remember the first time I was asked for my autograph. It was very, very cool.
Actually, and it's probably not there, but this is basically a sequel to Expected Journey, which is right here.
Wow.
Right.
I'm writing another book that way.
I'm glad they didn't wait till this. Now, my comment's gonna be really appropriate right now.
I'm on one of the writing groups I'm on. Somebody posted, how did you celebrate the publication of your first book? And I said, by writing my second book.
As you can see, Vance has become quite lengthy in his second novel.
Wow.
His first.
Yeah.
So I've got to send in the thing to them.
When I wrote this,
I'm gonna get.
at the time, I had my first heart attack.
We did
So
before, so
I wasn't
we
able
have
to
enough.
publicize it, that's why I wanted to get it underway.
So do you want-
So
You are not allowed to have another one here.
this one is really special.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, let's put this back, so.
I should also announce one last thing. Vance, you, besides Andrea and myself, you are our first non-owner publication. And we're
Wonderful.
very happy. Thank you.
I'm very happy with everything that you have done to help me. And
You're
the
welcome.
process has been great.
They made it very easy for me to publish. Luke was always there, telling me what to do. Andrea was there asking me for money, but
That's my job. That's what I
it
paid
did
for.
work, so I'm very pleased. Thank you. So, I have a short story tonight. You want me to read?
Yes.
All right. I had a writing group with some very lovely people, and I give them a prompt each week. And this is the prompt I gave them.
Turn the mic on.
You can't hear me?
The recording.
Okay. This is the prompt that I gave them a couple of weeks ago. It's a young man on a train, his feet are up, and he is sleeping. So, the young man slept deeply, despite the rhythmic clatter of the train wheels beneath him. Outside the windows, the countryside of Eastern Europe flew past in shades of green and gold. Fields littered with haystacks, harvested for the approaching winter. Quaint villages appeared and then vanished into memories. He sat alone in the second-class compartment, scrunched up in his seat. At first glance, his appearance suggested hardship. His trousers were stained with dust and dried mud, the cuffs tucked neatly into worn canvas-topped boots. The clothing had a military look about it, but there were no visible insignias or badges to identify a nation or a unit. Yet, there were contradictions. His hands rested loosely across his chest. His fingers were long, elegant, and surprisingly well manicured. His hands are the hands of a pianist or an artist, rather than a soldier. His face, untroubled in sleep, possessed a calm beauty. Dark lashes rested against light, clear skin. A faint scar crossed one cheek, perhaps from a duel, but it added character to his youthful features. An elderly woman seated across the aisle studied him occasionally. He looked so much like her grandson, her late grandson. The short time she had him in her life was the happiest, and then he had gone to war. Tears flowed quietly down her wrinkled cheeks, wishing she could hold him and give him solace, and to ease her aching heart as well. Like everyone who passed and noticed him, she wondered where he was going. The ticket tucked in his pocket would only reveal that he was traveling west, perhaps to Warsaw, to Berlin, or perhaps Berlin, perhaps further still. And what had he seen? The stains on his clothing suggested roads traveled on foot. The exhaustion etched into the corners of his eyes hinted at sleepless nights. One could imagine him having recently left Ukraine, where for years young men from many nations had volunteered, fought or driven ambulances, delivered supplies, or simply tried to help amidst the devastation. Perhaps he had stood in cities shattered by artillery. Perhaps he had helped carry wounded civilians from collapsed buildings. Perhaps he had watched winter descend upon trenches where young men became old men in a matter of months. Or perhaps he had seen something entirely different. Maybe he was returning from a humanitarian mission. Maybe he had spent months photographing the war for a newspaper. Maybe he had been searching for relatives displaced by conflict. The truth remained hidden beneath closed eyelids, perhaps giving respite from the events of a cruel and evil world. As the train rolled onward, he shifted slightly in his seat and his feet. For an instant, a small smile touched his lips. Was that smile suggesting home? Not necessarily a place, but a destination. Someone waiting at a station. A mother who had not seen him in years. a wife who had worried through countless nights, a child who knew him only through photographs and video calls. Whatever burdens he carried, they seemed lighter in that moment. The train rushed through the fading afternoon. Fields gave way to forests. Forests gave way to distant towns. The young man slipped on, suspended between what he had witnessed and what awaited him. No one in the compartment knew his story, but everyone who glanced at him sensed the same thing. He had traveled through darkness and was finally heading toward the light. Go with God. Go in peace.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes for critique. Let's see what we can say.
Okay. Questions? Questions? No questions? I'll sit down. I'll take my book. Yes.
Yes, the one thing that stood out to me, which I really liked, was you were using the word perhaps, and then switched to maybe. And I thought that was a great transition. It kept that hope alive, that whole movement of it could be, okay, this could be one or the other. But it wasn't the repetitiveness, because it kept a whole freshness in there. And I thought you did that very, very well.
Thank you. Thank you.
As it turns out, that's exactly what I wrote. I enjoyed the different images with each perhaps, and then with each making. I thought that was great.
Stop looking at my paper.
Wonderful. I also think, I'm sorry, unless anybody has, I really enjoyed the description of the young man. I thought you wrote that beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The photograph is really quite remarkable. It's sad, it's beautiful, it's touching, and this young man could have been on a train from anywhere, going any place. So that's it, folks. And I have my new book, published by Shattered Ceiling Press. So if you would like to get your book published, contact Luca or Andrea, and they will help you.
Vance will be at the side of the room selling them tonight.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Vance. Let's see the sign. Mary Keating is not here, so Russ, you're up.
Hi, I'm Russell Hassan. This is my first time coming to this group, so thank you for
Welcome.
having me. I'm going to be reading the first chapter of a novel I'm working on called Escape from the Citadel. It's an epic fantasy novel, and this is the first time I'm reading it aloud, so you'll have to forgive me if there's any place where I kind of stumble over the words. And I also should give a content warning that there's kind of there's a little bullying in the first scene, so I just want to let you know. Okay. Chapter 1: The Two Princes. Tyler, age 20, and Nick, age 18, stood upon the ridge of the sloping white-tiled roof of the tallest eastern tower of the Citadel. The castle's courtyards and towers spread out below them, the sun rising behind them, its golden orb casting a radiant cascade of orange light that warmed their backs and reflected off the polished white stone of Citadel Keep and back into their eyes. The air was thin and dry. It had not rained recently, and a firestorm to the south 2 weeks ago had dried the moisture out from the weather. Spikes dotted the soles of their boots, giving their feet traction on the roof's shingle tiles. Sunlight reflected off their short-cut black hair, brown skin, full-body black leather armor, and gold-painted iron spikes covering the black leather. The early risers, the laborers, knights, and wizards who rose at dawn to get an early start to the day's affairs, rushed around the courtyards below, eagerly going about their business. Had any of the peasants looked up, they would have seen the two boys as black and gold silhouettes against the diagonal line of the rooftop with the glowing golden half-disk of the rising sun directly behind them. Tyler gazed down at the courtyard, his eyes scanning left and right. He saw many people, but no squirrels. Nick pulled out his magic wand with his right hand from the long cylindrical wand sheath that held it strapped to his left hip. With his left hand, he grabbed his spellbook out from the small square red leather pouch strapped to his right hip, the cover of which snapped off easily so that Nick could pull out his spellbook at a moment's notice. Nick used the thumb of his wand-holding hand to open the book to one particular page and began to read, eyes wide and attentive. Nick finished reading, closed the book, and returned it to his pouch. Tyler waited for the spell to be cast, his body tense and ready, flexing his arms and legs in anticipation, opening and closing his hands to prime them to be ready to grab a magic squirrel. Nick's eyes glowed with white light. He waved his wand in front of him with a very precise, intricate zigzag pattern. He spoke the arcane words of the magic spell written on the page of his spellbook, and he finished the magic spell by waving his wand with a wide flourish. Bands of white light radiated out from the tip of his wand and expanded in ever-widening circles. The light faded from Nick's eyes, but Nick looked around with acute perception, his eyes seeing everything that his magic spell saw. It worked, Nick said, and oh my God, it's there. Nick pointed. Tyler looked. There, in the tiny corner of an alcove of the courtyard far below them, a small brown bushy-tailed squirrel sat upon the stone disc of the fountain, looking at its reflection in the water. Let's go, Tyler said. Tyler and Nick slid down the roof, reached the edge, and jumped, landing on a parapet overlooking the courtyard. They ran, reached the staircase, rushed down, and burst out a door into the courtyard. The squirrel, right in front of them, looked up, saw the two young men coming after it, and ran away, fleeing towards the center of the courtyard. Tyler and Nick gave chase, their legs pumping, and they kept on the squirrel's tail as it fled in a straight line across the courtyard and reached the other side, where wide stairs led down. The squirrel scampered down the stairs, Tyler and Nick in hot pursuit. The squirrel fled to the base of the stairs, which emptied out into a wider courtyard full of people. The squirrel ducked between people's legs, vanishing from view. Follow me, Nick screamed to his brother. My spell can still see it. Tyler followed Nick, and they crashed right into a group of magical researchers who were walking towards the Citadel Library. Papers, books, scrolls went flying everywhere. Tyler and Nick did not pause for even one moment. They jumped right back up and continued to run, while the scholars glowered after them, shaking their fists and muttering curses. There, I see it, Tyler said, gesturing at the dawn squirrel ahead of them. The squirrel, some distance ahead, looked back, saw the boys, and ran, disappearing into the crowd. Tyler and Nick chased. They could see the squirrel. They were gaining on it, when a wheelbarrow full of red crystals was in their way. They ran as fast as they could and leaped, their toes scattering red crystals from the wagon onto the ground as they jumped over it. They landed, continued to chase. They saw the squirrel. They accidentally ran into some commoners carrying carcasses of meat and sacks of flour in from below towards the mess halls, but they ran on without pausing to see whether the men had dropped their cargo or not. The squirrel ran into a corner. Tyler and Nick cornered it. Tyler knew they had it. He grabbed for it. It dodged his hand, ran in between his legs, and fled back into the courtyard. Tyler muttered a curse. He and his brother chased it again. The squirrel scampered straight up a wall and out of sight. Tyler saw a door and raced into it. He and Nick found the stairs and sprinted up the stairs into a hall, found the right door, and ran out onto a parapet. They saw the squirrel climbing along the roof of the tower across from them. They ran along, reached the edge of the parapet, and jumped. Their two bodies were framed in midair by the morning light, 100-foot drop below them, both boys laughing. They landed on the roof. The squirrel actually ran towards them, but then it saw them, turned around, and ran the other way. A flash of glowing red light, a boom of thunder, and a large red glowing orb like a giant angry soap bubble shot out at the squirrel. Nick held his wand aimed at the squirrel, but the bubble hit the roof tile instead of the squirrel and burst like a bubble popping. The dawn squirrel jumped from this roof to another. Tyler and Nick ran to the edge of the roof and, without slowing down, they jumped, sailed through the air, and landed on the next rooftop. The squirrel crawled to the edge of the roof and then down and vanished into an open window. Tyler spotted an exit door on the roof. He and Nick darted into the door and down the stairs. They were in a long hallway lined with stained glass windows, one of the Citadel's holy chapels. Tyler and Nick reached the window through which the squirrel had entered. It wasn't there. They paused, swaying slightly, bodies dripping with sweat, hearts pounding in their chests. Where is it? Tyler asked. Nick squinted, summoning up the remnants of his force of sight. I see it, I think. It's in the chapel. It's here. But I'm not sure exactly where, Nick said. Wait, I think I recognize where it is. It's near the stained glass window that Father made to commemorate his victory in the Great War. And I don't think there's any place it can escape to from there. Come on, bro. We've got this thing. Tyler grinned, giggling, giddy with the thrill of the hunt and with the prospect of the win. He and Nick raced down the hall, ran around the corner, and crashed straight into a man.
That's it.
Yep.
Questions, comments?
It's Russ, yes?
I use Russell or Russ,
Okay,
actually.
Russ. Who was your audience?
I think it's probably great for young adults.
Yeah.
Is that your aim as well?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, okay, good, good.
Yeah, good action.
Thank you.
Yes, and good descriptions as well.
Russ?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you go next?
No, yeah, it's okay.
Yes. I do want to, I like the story, I like the way you write and stuff like that. My only comment is, there's a lot of narration and there's spots I think you missed where you could throw in dialogue to increase the action and increase the suspense a little bit. The two that caught my attention most were when they first saw the squirrel, okay? And your dialogue was, there it is. Okay, and then you went back to narration where you could go with, there it is, there's a squirrel, let's go get it, okay? And that carries, and embodies the story more, gets the reader more active into the story. And the other one was when they were chasing the squirrel, okay, right in the beginning, and they ran into the magical creatures, okay? And you just said to us, they ran into the magical creatures. But in my mind, I heard, hey, what's that? Get out of my way, and then they could have, there could be more interaction so that you're not just telling us the story. Okay. And you're showing us the short story through dialogue, and your descriptions are really good. I don't want to take anything away from that. I just think that
So more dialogue.
more dialogue to create more action.
Great. Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
I might have missed something in this, but when you said it popped like a bubble, it sounded, I could be wrong, might have heard it wrong. It sounded like you said it was encased in a bubble and then it popped like a bubble.
No, he shot a bubble at it. It wasn't, the bubble didn't.
Yeah, but it popped like a bubble. You
Yeah.
used bubble twice. There's gotta be a better way to juxtapose.
Cool.
Russ, I have a question for you. What's the age group you're looking for?
I'm not, well, honestly, to be honest, I'm not sure whether it would be YA or just fantasy, but geared towards younger readers.
That's a YA book.
You think so?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
To Robert's point, okay, trust the reader, okay, he shot a bubble at him, and it burst. You don't have to say it
Yeah.
burst like we'll know, the reader
Yeah.
knows
Yeah.
it burst. Okay,
Okay.
they know the bubble itself is burst.
Remember, kids have a lot more intelligence than we sometimes give them.
Yeah.
So they'll follow the story. It's gonna be a story.
Go ahead, Fran.
You pull me into the story, but the chase went on and on and on, and I kind of wanted something to happen, to catch the squirrel a little sooner. It was like, okay, I'm waiting, they're chasing. I would like to have had some sort of conclusion or something happen a little sooner.
Yeah, while I was reading it, I actually think I agree with you. I didn't realize that, but I think you're right.
Thanks,
Yes.
Russ. You guys have one, go ahead, man.
No, I was just gonna say, in reference to Luca's comment to you about description, I mean, it could be a golden squirrel, or it could be a red squirrel.
Yeah.
It could have a bushy tail. There's things about it, or a kaibab squirrel with the tufted ears. But a little more description of the squirrel itself, I think, would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adrian, you are up.
Hi, I was here, maybe 2 months ago, and I was sharing a story about my, experience having dinner with my first white friend. I'm writing a book that I'm trying to write stories about my experience as an African American growing up in a wonderful town of Willingboro, New Jersey, that was a Levittown housing area. And so, I'm sorry because I'm finishing the story. Some of you may not know, you didn't hear the story, but it's about dinner when I'm in kindergarten with my first white friend. You remember that, okay? So I'm going to start where I left off. My friend's name is Phyllis and her last name is Berman. Okay? So, as everyone at the Berman's table began to serve themselves, reaching for the dishes with casual ease, I waited. My small hands were clasped tightly in my lap, my head bowed slightly, expecting the familiar words of grace. But the moment passed in silence. There was no folding of hands, no murmured prayer, just the cheerful clatter of silverware and the lively conversation of a family coming together. A wave of surprise washed over me. It wasn't disapproval, not a sense of judgment, but a profound sense of difference. It was the first time I realized that not everyone shared the same customs, the same traditions that I had always considered to be universal. It was a subtle crack in the foundation of my childhood understanding, a glimpse into the vast and varied tapestry of human experience. It was a moment that expanded my understanding of the world, revealing that even within the bonds of community, there were variations in how people expressed their beliefs and values. It didn't stop me from saying a prayer in my heart. Later, as Phyllis and I settled back into our games, the memory of the incident from earlier that day resurfaced in my mind. During recess, Miss Morgan, her voice filled with her usual warmth, had asked us to hold hands for the entire class to quickly form a circle to play a game. A little white boy named Tommy, his face contorted in a mask of distaste, had recoiled from my outstretched hand. His blue eyes, usually so bright, had clouded over with an expression I couldn't quite comprehend. He had refused to hold or even touch my hand. Miss Morgan, realizing what was going on, came to my rescue. With a stubborn defiance, he had also refused to hold Miss Morgan's hand. The hurt had been a small prickle then, a fleeting sting quickly forgotten in the rush of the school day. But now, in the accepting embrace of the Berman's house, the memory that memory took on a new dimension. It was no longer an isolated incident, but a piece of a larger puzzle, a glimpse into a world where differences could be a source of division, not just diversity. It was a reminder that the prejudices that my Aunt Margaret fought against were not confined to distant places, but could even exist within the seemingly innocent world of a kindergarten classroom. The day drew to a close. My mother arrived to pick me up, her smile warm and reassuring. And as we drove home, I went on excitedly about my adventures, recounting the games we played, the delicious food we had eaten, and the kindness of Phyllis and her family. I shared how they didn't say a blessing over the food, but I didn't let it stop me. Years spun by a kaleidoscope of changing seasons and evolving friendships. Kindergarten faded into the hazy realm of childhood memories. Phyllis and I drifted apart, our paths diverging as we navigated the complexities of growing up. The memories of Willingboro, however, remained a reminder of the complexities of race, the courage of my Aunt Margaret, and the lessons learned in a town that was both a battleground and a home. High school came and went, a whirlwind of classes, dances, and tentative steps of adolescence and teenage years. College beckoned, pulling us in different directions, scattering the threads of our shared childhood. The divisions and alliances of youth often overshadowed the simple connections we had forged in those early years. Then, at our 40th high school reunion, amidst the familiar faces and the joyous cacophony of reconnecting voices, I saw her. Phyllis, her brown hair, once worn in bangs and curls, was now salt and pepper with an elegant sophistication. Her face, etched with the gentle lines of time, still held the same warm smile. The same sparkling brown eyes that had captivated me so many years ago. We embraced, a rush of shared history flooding back in an instant. We talked for hours, catching up on lost time, sharing stories of our lives, our families, our journeys. And then as the conversation turned to our early childhood, to the days of Miss Morgan and the awkward circle time, Phyllis shared something I had never known. You know, she said, her voice soft with a mixture of nostalgia and a bit of revelation. My mom told me about the phone call she made to your mother to arrange for our first play date. Your mom wanted to make sure my parents knew you were Black. The words hung in the air, suspended between the clinking of glasses and the murmur of the other conversations. A wave of emotions washed over me, a complex blend of understanding, gratitude, and a tinge of sadness. My mother, always my fierce protector, had navigated a world that often wasn't kind to little Black children. She had known the blatant and subtle prejudices, the unspoken biases, the weight of a history that cast long shadows. Mom had wanted to shield me, to prepare the burners, to ensure that I was seen not just as a child, but as a Black child entering their world. And she had done so in the context of a town with a complicated past, a town where our presence was both an example of progress and a reminder of the deep-seated challenges that still persisted. And Mrs. Berman, in her quiet acceptance, in her unspoken understanding, had offered a space of grace. She had opened her home, her heart, to a little girl who was different from her own daughters, not with fanfare or self-congratulation, but with a simple, profound gesture of human kindness. In a town built on exclusion, she had extended a hand of inclusion. In that moment, standing in the crowded Reunion Hotel banquet room, surrounded by the echoes of our shared past, I understood the true significance of that long ago play date. It wasn't just a childhood adventure. It was a bridge built across a chasm of difference, a testament to the power of human connection to transcend the barriers that society constructs. It was a small act of defiance against the legacy of segregation, a kind of victory for the values of acceptance and understanding that my Aunt Margaret had fought so hard to uphold. Phyllis Berman, my first white friend, and her family had given me a gift that day, a gift that acceptance, of belonging, of the simple yet profound understanding that beneath the surface of skin color and cultural differences, we are all connected by the shared threads of humanity. And that, I realized, was a lesson that had stayed with me, shaping my understanding of the world and the importance of embracing the beauty of our shared humanity. A lesson rooted in complexity of a town called Willingboro and the enduring power of a mother's love and a friend's open heart.
I understood when you said that you were talking about how you were at dinner and they had a different set of values, a different set of understanding. I remember being 14, 15 years old. I'm raised as a Roman Catholic.
Right.
And I was reading my first adult book, like a grown-up book, per
Right.
se. Okay, just to be clear. And somebody said, "Do you believe in God?"
Right.
And the other person said, "No." And I was stunned by it,
Stunned.
absolutely baffled.
Yes.
I understood that there were different faiths. I understood there were Protestants and Jews and Muslims. It never occurred to me that somebody couldn't possibly believe in
Right.
God. And it was just.
It was mind-blowing.
Yeah,
Right.
I had a real difficult time
Yeah.
wrapping my head around that.
No, I remember as that little 5-year-old little girl, when they didn't say the grace,
Yeah,
that just, it really blew my mind.
I totally get that.
Anybody else?
I will. So this is maybe a little bit long-winded, but I put down, you paint such a wonderful time of nostalgia and painful history the same time. And you take us through it, through the innocence and the darkness of it at the same time. And over, I mean, it's like I feel the train going up the hill and it's building up, and then we fall off the cliff. And then I feel the train build, and it's funny because I wanna keep riding it, I wanna keep hearing it, I wanna, you know, and, so you've done a great job.
Thank you.
I will admit that when you got to the point where you said, Phyllis Burton, my first white friend at the end, I think you could have ended it right there.
Right there.
Right there, yeah. And that would have been perfect. I mean, the retrospect at the end of it, good, but I don't think
Not
you needed it.
necessary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you going to write about, we had this little kindergarten, and then at the 40th high school reunion, are you going to, I wanted to know what happens in between, a little bit about those in between years. Are you planning on putting any more in about that as they come later?
Well, about that particular experience, because this idea are just snippets of these moments in my life
Okay.
that bring me to where I am now and how I got here. Like, this really was
Pivotal.
it was a pivotal, when I think back, this was a pivotal moment, because, and then hearing the story that my mom had, I didn't know that my mom was making sure that her daughter was gonna be all right. My mom had died many years, before I heard this story. And so it just brought back such an unbelievable memory, because I didn't grow up where my parents were making like real obvious, they were subtle things that they wanted to spare us from. Not growing up being so, like looking over our shoulders that every white person was a bad person. They didn't want that. But at the same time, they wanted us to be aware. And the way that my mom did that, it just made me think how, like, wow, Mom, thank you.
You're gonna have other snippets during.
Of different
as you grow
different,
up. Okay.
different experiences, yes.
But what made it so powerful was that the tone was so gentle. It was a 5-year-old child.
Right.
And that really evoked the,
Yeah,
power.
and I think that 5-year-old child has continued to guide me, because I have so many of these stories.
But staying there throughout the entire piece had to be difficult,
Right.
I'm sure.
Right.
You kept going back to the complexity of the town and the mix of everything, and it almost was too much, except you lived through it, so
Yeah.
it was a complex time, so I get that. It's important to say it a number of times.
Yes.
But it was so beautifully written.
Oh, yeah,
That you
it's-
don't mind
Right.
hearing it.
It's
again.
hard, and I know, and that's why I wanted to bring this, because I want this to be palpable, but I don't wanna reduce at all what it meant. Because who I am today is as a result of all of those experiences, good, bad, beautiful, and ugly. It's part of who I am. So I really wanna make sure that that gets out. But it gets out in a way that is palpable.
My kids went to school, grade school, at Columbus School, South Norwalk. And my kids are Jewish, and their best friends were all black, brown,
Right.
and Hispanics. And they never knew the difference, they never
Right.
understood, they never had that, And I kind of impressed on them at a young age, you don't get to be racist because there are people who don't like you just because you're Jewish.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, not, again,
No, I know.
I'm a hero, but I saw that, I'm trying to, like your mother saw
Yes.
for your,
Yes,
Any more comments? Thank you.
okay.
Hello, this is my first time at in Norwalk, but I've been to Milford and New Haven. I'm just testing out snippets from different chapters of my historical fiction novel. It's loosely based on an uncle. It's set in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, later in Washington DC. The part that I'm going to read tonight, the protagonist, there's an attempted assassination on him in Vietnam at a fire support base, and he survives. However, there's a young Marine that's killed. An investigation is underway, but it's leaning more towards an American that has killed him. We're going to be in Davenport, Iowa. His body has just been returned home with a escort, and his ranking officer took leave to be there for his services. It was only when the maroon and cream checker marathon of the Royal Cab Company pulled to a stop at 824 West 6th Street, its tires settling against a concrete curb, and the taxi driver finished his monologue. I'll tell you, son, if Leo DeRocher doesn't find some bats to back up Billy Williams pretty damn quick, the Cardinals are going to run away with the whole National League by August. It's Bob Gibson this, Bob Gibson that. Guy's got an ERA under 1.0. It's unchristian. And don't get me started on the guard taking Holtzman right when we needed him in the rotation. They're saying Lou Brock's already got 30 stolen bases down in St. Louis. 30, and it's only July. Banks is hitting fine, sure, but a guy can't carry the whole north side on his back forever. Gunnery Sergeant David Holmes didn't mind the one-sided conversation. Took his mind off the mechanical click of the taxi meter and the frequent interruptions of the dispatcher's voice coming through the radio with potential fares to destinations. As Dave reached over the front seat's headrest to hand the driver payment for the ride, he looked through the passenger side window. The park's modest but sturdy frame house sat beyond a beautifully manicured lawn. His eyes tracked upward to the porch. He scanned left and right, finally settling on the American flag hanging from a cast iron bracket mounted to the post beside the front steps. Easing out of the cab, he stood tall and adjusted his green service outfits, tugging his sleeves and checking his ribbons and badges. His garrison cap rested in one hand. As he moved toward the trunk to retrieve his duffel and his garment bag, the cab driver had already removed them and was ready to hand them over. The driver extended his hand. Name's Sal. If you need a ride, just ask the dispatcher for me. I'll get you where you need to go. Thank you, sir. I'll do that. As Sal pulled the cab away from the curb, Dave found himself halfway up the front walk. He stopped and took in the neighborhood. Kentucky bluegrass lawns stretched up and down the street. American elms lined the road. Some were diseased, while others maintained their thick canopies. Beneath the flag, hostas bordered the foundation of the park's home. They reminded him of a miniature version of the jungle he had left behind. Along the fence lines, orange daylilies bloomed beside clumps of pink-purple cornflowers. Black-eyed Susans soaked up the afternoon sun at the corners of the porch. Inside the house, Patty looked through the curtains and called for her mother. Mama, there's a Marine on the walk. He's just standing there. Mrs. Parks moved to the window and stopped beside her daughter. What's he doing, Mama? Who is he? Mrs. Parks leaned closer, her hand rising to cover her mouth. Oh my. She took a deep breath. Honey, that's David Holmes. From Elijah's letters? Yes, honey. Her eyes remained on the Marine. From Elijah's letters, she repeated softly. But what's he doing? Mrs. Park watched him for another moment. I think he's enjoying something he's missed for a while. Please go find your dad and let him know we have a guest. Mrs. Parks moved toward the screen door. Patty stayed close beside her. Dave noticed the movement and looked up the porch. Hello, Mrs. Parks. You are Gunnery Sergeant David Holmes. Elijah wrote about you often. Please come in. For a moment, Dave forgot about the jungle, the miles he had traveled, the house, and the funeral. Elijah had written about him. The realization landed harder than he expected. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Memories of Elijah flashed through his mind as he moved from the bright sunlight into the shade of the porch. As Dave stepped through the doorway, Mrs. Parks said, "This is my daughter Patricia. Patty's gonna go find her dad and let him know we have company." Patty stayed put and stared at Dave for several moments before finally heading off to search for her father. Mrs. Parks stepped closer to Dave and placed her hand behind his bicep, guiding him gently to the front parlor. The room was neat and cozy. He saw a 3-cushion sofa along one wall, a pair of matching armchairs, and a lazy boy recliner that most certainly was only for Mr. Parks. A Zenith color television console with its large cabinet was directly across from the recliner. Dave didn't miss the photo of Elijah in his boot camp blues that sat in the top console next to the small brass eagle. He placed his duffel and garment bag at the end of the sofa. Mrs. Parks said, "Thank you," but was unable to finish her thought when the screen door at the rear of the house banged shut behind Patty and her dad. The moment of silence ended when Patty's voice filled the house. "He's right here, Dad." 2 steps behind Patty came Elias. The rigid click-clack of a locked mechanical joint accompanied each step. Dave recognized that sound immediately. Elias didn't wait for Dave to offer a greeting. He continued wiping his hands on a rag, tucked it into his back pocket, took a few deliberate steps through the room leading to the parlor, his eyes on Dave's service outfits before moving to the gold insignia on his sleeves. "Gunnery Sergeant," Elias said with a low, raspy growl. Dave's posture stiffened as Elias came to a stop in front of him, his large, thick hand extended. "We hoped you could make the trip, sir." Hearing Mr. Parks call him sir unsettled him. It felt unearned while in their home, 2 days before they bury their son. Dave grasped Mr. Parks' hand. It was calloused and matched Dave's grip. Mr. Parks' handshake carried more authority than any brass star Dave had ever stood at attention for. In that moment, these men did not need to speak. Shared grief was understood. The screen door slammed again. Dave turned toward the sound and caught the sight of a young man entering the room. Mrs. Parks said, "David, this is Eddie, Elijah's best friend. He's a college student. He's been a great help to Elias, and after Elijah joined the Corps." Eddie nodded to Dave. "Mr. Parks has taught me a lot about fixing things, and I will learn more with him than in any school. I'm happy to help when I can." Dave returned a nod. That told him enough. Mr. Parks placed his hand on Dave's shoulder and said, "Let's sit."
I'm gonna stop it there.
Oh, that's good, because that's all I have.
He took a breath, that was that stuff.
I wasn't in the military, but I do know that Sergeant Bristle at being called sir. I like how you put that in there. That was a very astute observation. I'm sure you already knew that.
I like where you're going, I like the story, and I'm a person who likes a lot of description, but I almost found it to be too much description of unnecessary things. Like his seeing the flowers and thinking back about them.
Well, can I just make a comment about that?
Sure.
So, this is from chapter 12.
Okay.
11 chapters are in Vietnam during the war, where he has not seen any of these things. He's seeing, red clay,
Yeah.
artillery firing off constantly. I think it's necessary to say, I have a moment where I can take a breath and see these flowers, see these trees, see the grass.
Okay.
That's what I liked about it.
That's what I liked about it.
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
You
have to
gave
agree
us,
with you on
may I
that.
speak?
I'm sorry.
You gave us a strong sense of place. Very strong. The 3-seat sofa, I knew I was visualizing it, so that's really good.
Because it's a different world for him. He's a career, at this point in his life, he's a career military man. He's just been away from this for so long, so he's trying to reacclimate himself to this life.
I was just going to say that it's exactly what it sounded like to me. A military man who's been away at war is now in a civilian environment and just soaking it in, because this is, you know, he didn't get this, and now he has it, so yeah, that didn't bother me at all, none of that.
Having heard several different pieces from this November chapter, I happen to agree with your assessment of having to get the color and the flowers and stuff in there. But what struck me on this one was there's a bit of change in cadence that is more civilian here. And I like that. You know that I really enjoyed the shortness of being in the military and the directness of it. And this seems really appropriate that you've made that shift, because it makes that shift without you having to physically make that shift.
Yep.
And tell us about it. I think that's done well.
So it's funny that you say that, because one of the next kind of scenes is how I see them in my head. Mrs. Parks asked them to stay at their house, you know, the gunnery sergeant and the lieutenant who escorted her son, which is highly unusual, but as it turns out, the gunnery sergeant is on leave. He is not in a capacity for the service, so he will accept it. He'll leave it up to the lieutenant to decide too, but you know, this is more of a civilian thing than the military, you know, aspect of it.
Just a little nitpicky thing that personally, I struggle when you have characters' names that both begin with the same letter. So you had Elijah and then somebody, so.
Well, so his father,
I know,
Elijah's
but
father's Elias, which
Right.
kind of why they named him that.
Yeah, is that true? Was you taking this from your family? or-
No, but this was a Midwestern thing when I was doing research,
Interesting.
and particularly an Iowa kind of issue, so.
As a reader, I find it confusing, no matter how famous the author is.
Yeah.
It's just something to navigate.
Oh, good point.
I stand corrected.
No, that's okay. No, I'm good with feedback, that's why I do this, I wanna get, you know, I wanna see what people say.
Well, you know, the fact that there was a story ahead of this, which I
Oh,
have not
so
heard.
that's the problem that I even, you know, I started off, when I was in New Haven the first time, I started off with a chapter completely unrelated to the actual protagonist, and one of the first comments that Lucas said was, I'd like to learn more about the shooting. Well, I really couldn't do that at that point, because it kind of give the story away. But, no, I do appreciate any feedback. That's my first time writing, so any feedback I can get.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, Fran, you are up next.
So, what I'm reading for you this evening is a bit from a short story. It's too long, I'm sure I won't be able to finish it. That is a family recollection. It's called Christmas Recollection Bourbon Cookies. I grew up in a middle-class Methodist home in Oklahoma in the 50s, and my very proper mother, who was not in fact proper at all, had carefully honed that persona. She never allowed cursing, smoking, or alcohol to be drunk in our home, with the one exception of Christmas. As the holiday approached, the forbidden libations slowly began to make their yearly appearance, as the smell of my Uncle Roy's cigars and colorful language when he and my Aunt Lucille came home. Alcohol not only appeared, but appeared in abundance, and even more improbably, actually achieved star status over the course of the season. It was still not openly consumed, but nonetheless became an indispensable part of our yearly holiday traditions. My mother had two older sisters, my very proper Aunt Ruby, who was the oldest of the three girls, Ruth, who was not quite so proper and considerably more lenient on the subject of drinking, and one brother, Roy, who was the oldest of the four siblings. Unlike his sisters, he smoked, drank, and cursed freely, much to their chagrin. They lived in Missouri, Kansas, and Indiana respectively, and the best Christmases of my youth were when they all came home for the holidays. My Aunt Ruby was the most prudish of the four siblings. However, she loved my mother's rum balls, which were an unbaked cookie. I always found it amusing that my teetotaler aunt could go on and on forever, tut-tutting my Uncle Roy and Aunt Lucille who enjoyed an evening cocktail before dinner while continuously popping my mother's very strong confection straight into that same tight, disapproving little mouth. And then there was my grandmother, Rose Sullivan, an Irish woman, through and through, who loved watching the boxing matches on Friday night with the men and believed life was for enjoying. My grandparents lived a few blocks from our house, and it was there that we celebrated Christmas Day when everyone came home. Each year, my grandmother made a thick, luscious eggnog, which was loved by all, and my father, grandfather, and uncles all gathered around her in the kitchen when it was ready. She would quietly fill their cups with this delicious holiday drink, at which time a small bottle of whiskey would magically appear. My Uncle Dooley, who was my Aunt Ruby's husband, was the one who usually supplied this additional ingredient, and he would discreetly add it to each man's cup as well as my grandmother's. It was never offered to me or my mother or aunts, and I seem to know that I shouldn't ask to be included in this surreptitious ceremony. I never understood why none of the other women ever asked to be included or acted as if they were totally ignorant or unaware of this ritual, as the huge punch bowl was finally conveyed into the dining room and ceremoniously set in the middle of the lace-covered dining table. This heralded the beginning of the Christmas Day feast. I never thought about the irony of these holiday rituals any more than I did about the appearance and prominence of liquor at this time. However, my Aunt Ruby's criticisms, yet insatiable delight with my mother's rum balls, and the spiking of my grandmother's eggnog did provide my brother and me much entertainment. My favorite part of Christmas was my mother's baking, where again liquor played a starring role. My mother was an incredible baker, and she baked year-round, not only for us, but for friends and church events, and eventually even turned it into a lucrative little business out of our small kitchen. Not surprisingly, her busiest season was Christmas, and both my brother and I knew that the overabundance of presents under the tree on Christmas morning was due in large part to our mother's cooking money, besides which we got to spend most of November and December sampling cookies. She could get orders for 10 or 20 dozens of cookies at a time, and she made fruitcakes almost daily. But most importantly, this is when the prohibited liquor would make its grand appearance. Rum for her chocolate rum balls, apricot brandy for her food cakes, and bourbon for her most popular and frequently ordered item, bourbon cookies. They were my favorite cookie, not because they contained bourbon, but because they were delicious. And for some reason that my 7-year-old self never quite understood, while I couldn't have whiskey in my eggnog, I could eat as many bourbon cookies as I wanted. From early November through the new year, our kitchen was warmed by an oven that was in almost constant use, and the beautiful maple table that graced our kitchen was constantly covered with huge pans of doughs and flour and brown sugar and eggs and butter that was used for baking. There were also brightly colored candied cherries and pineapple, dried apricots, glistening blanched almonds, coconut, roasted pecans, and of course her many recipes. It was here that my mother would organize her prized recipes, write down lists of needed ingredients, which my father would then dutifully shop for and make batch after batch of cookies and fruitcakes. Her Christmas baking culminated every year in a formal tea that was given for all of my teachers as well as my brothers. Our kitchen table would be covered not in pans of dough, but a beautiful lace tablecloth in my mother's prized silver tea service. There was a small silver pitcher and a bowl of milk for sugar, and delicate lemon slices were fanned out on a tiny china plate. There would always be a floral arrangement of red and white roses in the middle of the table, surrounded by red candles in her silver candlesticks, and the rest of the table would be laden with a huge assortment of her delicious cookies: snowballs, almond crescents, coconut dream squares, thin slices of both light and dark fruitcake, and delicate tea sandwiches. Her teas were always held on the last day before our Christmas school break and began, and they were legendary, a very sought-after invitation. For me, they were the highlight of the season, and I was always very proud of these beautiful teas. While my mother loved hosting her yearly tea, as well as the praise and fame that came with it, she hated when people asked for one of her recipes. She would never share them and would say either, "I am so sorry, but I can't. They are guarded family secrets," as she once told a music teacher of mine. Or if she felt she couldn't say no, she would give them a version of the recipe that she had revised to her satisfaction, thus assuring herself that it could never be duplicated. Such was the case one year when Mrs. Galloway, none other than the wife of our senior minister, asked her for the recipe for her bourbon cookies. She had eaten them at a church function and loved them. She was herself hosting a holiday tea for all the wives of the associate ministers and would love to have the recipe so that she could make them for her guests. While we in the family called them bourbon cookies, to the outside world they were fruit cookies. And my mother was mortified at the thought of having to admit that there was alcohol in her home, and worse yet, that she used it in her baking. Is that it?
Can she continue using this?
Yes,
It
you
wasn't,
can.
it wasn't us.
It
Oh, I'm
was-
sorry, I thought it was you. Okay.
No, it wasn't me, friend.
Okay.
I've got a doorbell.
However, she was also loath to say no, so she fell back on her failed self-practice of altering the recipe. This did present a problem, as it took her quite some time to decide what she could substitute for the bourbon, but she finally settled on apple juice. The recipe was then mailed to Mrs. Galloway, who called her about 2 weeks later to thank her and tell her that the cookies had turned out perfectly and were a big hit. However, they weren't quite the same or as good as my mother's. My mother was very gracious, feigned surprise, and came up with several possible explanations for the difference in taste. And she then happily put the matter to rest until years later. When both my brother and I were grown, our grandparents were sadly gone, as well as one by one our aunts and uncles, and my mother didn't bake much anymore. Our Christmases had become smaller, and more importantly, my brother had become a well-known chef who owned his own shop, did catering, gave cooking lessons, contributed regularly to our morning newspaper, and like my mother, was well-known and well-respected in our city. He had married, and he and his wife's first home was an apartment in a wonderful building near his shop, where who else happened to live there but the retired senior minister, Dr. Galloway, and his wife. While they didn't socialize, the Galloways had known my family since we were children, and Mrs. Galloway sometimes used my brother for catering and asked him for recipes, which, unlike our mother, he was happy to share unaltered. One Christmas, when I was just out of college, the morning newspaper asked him to write an article about the teas. Our mother used to host and share one of her recipes. I was coming home, and having inherited our mother's good cooking and baking genes, my brother thought it would be fun for us to bake together, create a beautiful table replete with silver, china, and crystal for the newspaper to photograph. He wrote a wonderful article about our mother, and the recipe he decided to share was my mother's bourbon cookies, AKA the fruit cookies. The morning the article appeared in the newspaper, my sister-in-law Jenna invited me over for brunch so that we could read the article together. We were sitting around having morning coffee and talking about the article when the first phone call of the morning came on. It was Mrs. Galloway, and she was laughing. "Michael, you have finally solved a mystery for me that I have been trying to figure out forever. Years ago, I asked your mother for the recipe for her fruit cookies. She gave it to me, but they never tasted quite the same or as good as hers, and you have finally solved the mystery, bourbon. So I thank you and thank you. Do you think she made a mistake when she gave me the recipe?" "Absolutely not," my brother immediately answered. now beginning to laugh as well. My mother hated giving out her recipes, and if she felt she couldn't say no, as she obviously did with you, she would simply change them. What did she substitute the bourbon for? Apple juice. Oh my, I feel terrible to have put her in that position, she said. Well, don't. She could have been honest and simply said no. Apple juice, oh my God. She was embarrassed and didn't want you and Dr. Galloway to know that she used liquor in her baking. Oh, Michael, she is going to be so mad at you for letting her secret out of the bag. Well, maybe she won't remember, she said, hopefully still laughing, and rang off. After he got off the phone and relayed all of their conversation to my sister-in-law and me, we all laughed as well. But Jenna very wisely said, oh, she'll remember all right. And no sooner did those words come out of her mouth than the second phone call of the morning came in. It was, of course, our mother. Michael, how could you publish one of my prized recipes? I passed them down to you and your sister to treasure. I entrusted them to you, and you put them out there for just anyone to have? Why would someone come to your shop and buy your cookies when they can just make them themselves? And I am so embarrassed. How can I ever face the Galloways again? And why is that, Mother? He asked mischievously. What has Mrs. Galloway got to do with anything? You know very well. No, I don't, he said, trying to sound innocent. Yes, you do, she almost screamed. You know very well that I gave her my recipe for bourbon cookies years ago, and I took out the bourbon. Well, you should have said no, and if you're embarrassed, it's your own fault. At that, she started to cry, and my brother tried to stop smiling, which he knew she could feel. She probably won't even remember the recipe, Mama, he said a little more gently, and like you, she doesn't even bake anymore. She buys my cookies, and at that moment, she slammed down the receiver. Oh, Michael, said Jenna in a distressed voice, this is going to ruin Christmas. Fortunately, however, Christmas was not ruined that year. My mother didn't speak to my brother for the next 3 days, but between my father and myself, we were able to coax her out of her black mood. No accusatory, embarrassing, or outraged calls came from Mrs. Galloway, which was her real worry, and I continuously told her how proud she should feel. After all, she was the star of the article. It was written to honor her and the beautiful teas she used to give. By Christmas morning, somewhat mollified, she thankfully agreed to go to my brother and sister-in-law's house for Christmas Day brunch. It was always a very elegant affair, which she looked forward to, and in truth would have been loath to miss. Their meeting was frosty and ridiculously polite, but there was no mention of the newspaper article or the infamous bourbon cookie recipe. And again, it was alcohol that came to the rescue and helped save that Christmas day. After years of abstinence and feigned protest, my mother had finally accepted and grown to love the absolutely delicious frozen strawberry daiquiris that my sister-in-law made just for her each Christmas day. So, after 2 frozen daiquiris, an incredible meal, much fussing over her by Jenna, and a beautiful cashmere shawl from my brother, my mother finally relaxed and enjoyed herself. Our Christmas day had turned out to be quite lovely as well as memorable. A perfect day, in fact. That year, the story of the bourbon cookie recipe became the newest addition to the Marsh-Henderson Christmas family lore, and joined that of my Aunt Ruby's love of rum balls and my grandmother's secretly spiked eggnog. However, it forever remained our favorite story, and the first one we would share when we came together and began to reminisce.
Hannah and Aunt made snowball cookies, the most delicious snowball cookies. Nobody had ever, every time I've seen them and tried them, they're not the same. And one of my cousins every year was like, oh, I'm gonna get the recipe. He never did. My aunt just passed away, and nobody knows how to make it.
Well, I think my mother made the very best I've ever had. Yes.
I love the way how you keep bringing us back, in this case, the cookies. You do this with most of your stories and stuff, and it makes us want to hear how you're going to bring us back into the loop.
Yes.
My only comment is, when you're getting back in after the son, after your brother, puts out the story of the cookies and stuff like that, and it's like you go through, even though it's good, you go through all the detail again, and I think you could shorten that a little bit and trust that the reader is going to catch on, like, how could you, instead of, how could you put the bourbon cookie recipe out there? It could be, how could you put the recipe out there? There are ways to shorten this a little bit, I think, that you might make.
You think that too many descriptive sections are too long or too much?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. You can go through that. There were a couple times I thought you were gonna end, and it would've been great, and you kept going. But for the most part, I mean, you do it well, don't get me wrong. But I think you could shorten it a little bit by not when you read it back to yourself, see where you're just repeating the same description or the same thing over. And I think you've got to trust that the reader's going to be able to follow it. And I think it'll be just as funny, just as, as reminiscent, either way.
Anything else?
I've heard it how many times before in the working stages, and it still makes me laugh.
Good.
Robert, you're up.
Yep. This is a short story of mine. My chosen profession, I've been reading comic books for my entire life, and I've been writing and working in comic books since '81. This is a story. I write comic scripts, and sometimes it's hard to find an artist that will finish a story in under a year. And so I started writing prose stories with my characters. So this is not so much a superhero story as just kind of superhero adjacent. Anne-Marie Romano was not one to complain about pain. After all, sorry, I went to do this. Don't be your timing, I need to time myself. Anne-Marie Romano was not one to complain about pain. After all, she was a federal marshal with the Witness Protection Program and had taken more than her share of hits. But she tended to suffer from crippling migraines, and right now, the ocular vision migraine that she was experiencing was sending shooting waves of excruciating agony throughout her skull, causing her to nearly double over. She had managed to hit all of her triggers at the same time: lack of sleep, dehydration, and she had consumed a pound of semi-sweet chocolate for breakfast. Plus, she had allowed her anti-migraine meds to run out, and she had tied one on the previous night just for fun. Right now, the only thing working in her favor was that the pharmacy was only a block and a half away from her DC apartment. Needless to say, this was the last thing that was going her way today. Stumbling into the corner of the pharmacy, she pushed her way past the small gaggle of people standing near the front of the store and headed towards the pharmacy at the back. Upon arriving, she stepped past a number of people and went right up to the counter, calling out the pharmacist. "Hey Joe, you got my script ready? This migraine is killing me." Even as she spoke, she became vaguely aware of the gangly man with the unkempt hair who was already standing at the counter. "Sorry, Bob, I'm not really this rude, but I got called ahead and I'm dying over here." Joe, the pharmacist, a middle-aged, slightly graying man in a lab coat, just stood there looking at Anne-Marie with a frightened, shocked look on his face. Gangly, unkempt man was starting to get agitated. "Hey, bitch, what the hell?" "Chill, dude, I'm regular." And I called it, "Whoa, what the?" Anne-Marie finally got a good look at the gangly, unkempt man and couldn't help but to notice that he was holding a 9mm Beretta in her face. Anne-Marie came up short. As a federal marshal, she was not unused to having guns pointed at her. She just didn't expect one to happen in her regular life. Taking half a step back, Anne-Marie tried desperately to focus on what was happening. Only double vision and excruciating pain of her migraine were causing that simple action to all but completely elude her. Stammering, she attempted to take stock of the situation that was unfolding around her. Pushing both of her hands through her own disheveled hair, she started shaking her head. No. All I wanted was my meds. My migraine is killing me. All I wanted is my meds." "I've got your meds right here, bitch," gangly, unkempt man said, while pushing his gun in her face. "Please, I just need my meds to focus." As Anne-Marie said the last word, she whipped her left hand up and over gangly, unkempt man's outstretched arm, striking him on the inside of his elbow. At the same time, she cupped her right hand under his gun and forced it violently backwards, so that it struck him on the bridge of his nose. As he yelped in pain, she grabbed his gun hand, twisting it to the right as she slipped her index finger of her right hand over his trigger finger, as she spun around, placing her back to his chest. As she brought the pork purloin gun, the firearm, up, she saw a second gunman holding a sawed-off shotgun, moving into position. Swinging the controlled gun up, Anne-Marie squeezed off 2 rounds. The first one struck the shotgun in the stock, shattering it. The second one hit the assailant's center mass, knocking him down. Even as she shot the gunman, she spotted a third shooter with a Smith & Wesson off to her right, spinning again, still dragging gangly, unkempt man with her. She drew a bead on him and shot twice more, hitting twice. She then forced the gun down and shot gangly, unkempt man in the foot and the leg. Screeching in pain, he finally relinquished control of the gun. Holding it flat in her right hand, she mashed it square into his face, sending him sprawling backwards. Then she took the gun and turned it to look for the fourth gunman, whom she was sure was there. As she did, she was rewarded with a round whizzing past just over her head. The fourth gunman was standing off to the left side, near the back of the pharmacy. Pivoting, she brought the Beretta up and fired 3 times, hitting him with each shot. Turning back to the man with the shotgun, she walked over to him, and as he was reaching for the fallen shotgun, she put another round in the back of his head. Walking over to the gunman who had been holding the Smith & Wesson, she saw that he was trying to crawl over to where he had dropped the gun. Standing over the fallen gunman, she cleared her throat. The gunman looked at the marshal. "Considering how I've had a migraine that's killing me, and I haven't missed a shot, you might want to reconsider your next move." The gunman hesitated a second and then pulled his hand back. Reaching down to pick up the Smith & Wesson, Anne-Marie said, "Good boy." Straightening up, she stomped down on his hand with the heel of her boot. Yowling in pain, he snatched his hand back as soon as he removed her heel. "Just be happy I didn't shoot you again." "Give me back my gun, bitch," Anne-Marie turned back to the pharmacy counter to see gangly, unkempt man holding a pair of scissors to the throat of a terrified woman. "Give me back my piece or I'll kill her." Holding up the gun, Anne-Marie said, "This? Sure," and tossed it to him. Pushing the woman out of his way and dropping the scissors, gangly, unkempt man caught the gun, then immediately turned it on Anne-Marie. "Stupid bitch, what do you think I was going to do with it?" He pointed it at her and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. Then he repeatedly pulled the trigger, looked and baffled, looked at the gun. "It's out of ammo, knucklehead," Anne-Marie said, as she raised the Smith & Wesson and shot the gangly man in the chest, forcing the round. The force of the round knocked him backwards over the pharmacy counter. "Seriously, am I the only one who counts rounds?" she must. And then, out loud to the bystanders still in the pharmacy, she said, "Anyone call the police? Nobody move!" came a cry from the front door as the DC police burst into the building. Immediately, Anne-Marie dropped to her knees and held her hands up over her head with her thumb through the finger guard of the Smith & Wesson. Federal Marshal, she called out as a pair of SWAT cops in SWAT gear moved in and threw a bead on her as she knelt. "Officers, my name is Anne-Marie Roman. I'm a federal marshal with WITSEC program. I work out of the office on Clark Street in Arlington. I'm wearing my shield on a chain around my neck and under my blouse. I'm going to reach into my blouse and pull it out slowly." However, before she could move, one of the cops reached inside her blouse and forcibly pulled out her bag and yanked it towards him to read, popping the top 2 buttons of her blouse in the process. "Yeah, she's a Fed," he said to his partner. "No, stop, she's not with him," the pharmacist, Joe, said as he hurried towards them. "That's Marshal Roman, she's one of my patients." She stopped the holdup. In one hand, Joe held a cup of water, and in the other, he held a plastic cup with Anne-Marie's meds. Shouldering his way past the SWAT cops, he knelt next to Anne-Marie and handed her both cups. "Here, Marshal, I've got your meds." Anne-Marie allowed the SWAT cop who hadn't grabbed her to take the gun and then reached out for the water and the meds. After drowning the meds and washing it back with the water, she rocked back on her knees and sat cross-legged on the floor. Holding her head in her hands, she said, "Everyone just go about your business. I'm going to sit here for a bit and hope I die." She then leaned forward with her head in her hands and her elbows on her knees and remained motionless. The 2 SWAT officers kept their guns aimed at her until the pharmacist looked up at them and said, "Shoot, go away and do something. Leave her alone." Finally realizing that she was no threat, they eventually moved to check out the fallen assailants. The pharmacist then retrieved the 2 cups and went back to his station.
Sorry.
About 15 minutes had passed. Okay. I didn't get it, but
Sorry.
it was almost there.
Questions, comments?
Do you explain why 4 heavily armed men would come in to rob a pharmacy?
They were,
That's what I wrote.
they were cowboy, they were drugstore junkies, and they were robbing the place for meds. And that was coming up.
Robert, is this in the
Yes.
middle, is this in the middle of the story somewhere?
This is the beginning of the story.
It is?
Mhm.
You know, the gun came out of nowhere. You know, it didn't, unless I missed a point, it felt like there wasn't,
Which gun, I'm sorry?
the very first one that was in her face.
Yeah, that was the point.
Okay.
She didn't see it.
Okay, she didn't see it, but then she expects the 4th gun, and, okay?
She's a cop.
Yeah, she's a cop. The only other comment I have is, you use the term gangly young man, okay? And then you start using gangly man, and it goes back and forth a couple of times. I like the fact that you shorten it to gangly man, because gangly young man over and
Unmet
over and
man.
over kind of takes us away from the story.
Yes.
So, but you started interchanging the two.
Mhm.
I think once you change it, stay with the change, it's much
Mhm.
better.
Okay.
I love the fast-paced feeling it had. The fact that, wow, we're right there in the story, and, you know, here's this woman who's hungover, and everything's going on around her. She just went to get a vacation.
Yeah, the rest is, yeah, that was the point I wanted to start the story with a bang. The story then slows down quite a bit after that. And this is one of my favorite characters. She's been in my head for quite a number of years. I've used her in a couple other stories. And I always knew her to be an angry character. And it wasn't until I was 3/4 of the way through this story where she herself revealed to me why she was angry. And I sat, when I got to that point in the story, I went, oh my, that's, wow. And I literally had to stop and just sit there for a minute and go, how did I do that?
Will you come back next month and finish the story?
Sure, I can do that. And
Well, these are for comic books?
I'm sorry?
These are for comics,
This is actually just a prose story. I do write comic books, but she appeared in one of my comic book stories. And she's equally,
Do a graphic novel, I know those are top.
the difference between a comic book and a graphic novel is 100 pages and $10. Quite literally, yeah. Yes.
So I did want to sort of echo the other comments about how the fact that it's a robbery.
Mhm.
I think you may want to introduce that as context earlier to kind of situate the reader in what's going on, because that kind of, why they're there in the very beginning when they first appear kind of isn't completely clear. But once it's understood that it's a robbery taking place, it becomes much easier to understand.
Yeah, well, again, she walked in on it. She didn't know, I didn't set the robbery up. I felt if I set the robbery up before she got there, it would have softened,
Right.
you know,
Well,
her reaction.
Once she's seeing it, the reader you can kind of reveal more to the reader once it's happening.
Mm.
And then the other thing I want to say is, I feel like is this the very start of the story?
Yes.
I feel like I need to know more about her as a character before all the action happens.
You get to know her as we go through it. Again, just starting out with a bang. I mean, I know who she is. I actually had a conversation with the Eastman and Laird, the guys who created the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and their story started out in black and white, and then it went into color. And I was having a conversation with one of them, and I said, "You guys screwed up." "What do you mean we screwed up?" "Well, your characters, all 4 turtles, they all look the same, and the only way I can tell which one is which is by looking at whatever weapons they're carrying. You got to do something to make them distinguished. How about making their masks a different color?" And I went, "Wow, we never thought of that, because we always knew who was who." And in the very next episode of the comic, they all had different color masks. So,
I did really like the writing.
thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Fred, you're gonna have to go up there.
Good evening. What I'm gonna write about is an event that happened a while ago. I thought it was important to put this on paper. And by the end of it, you'll find out why I felt it was important to put on paper. It's entitled 9 Hours of Hell.
Microphone.
9 hours of hell. 4.5 hours one way, 4.5 hours on the return, with about an hour intermission. 4.5 hours of gloom, 4.5 hours of sullenness, 9 hours of pure torture. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun in earnest over a decade ago. The DUI happened recently, a few days before Christmas, an event that was not shared with me. I found it odd that my son asked for a ride to visit family on Christmas Day. He never asked for rides. I asked repeatedly how his car was, and he said it was fine, he just didn't want to drive. His responses were short, direct, and hurried, conveying that "I don't want to talk about it" feeling, triggering my suspicions. 2 weeks later, while I was in Florida, he called me. It was a Friday, 4 in the afternoon, and the frantic request was for a letter from me authorizing him to remove my car from a location where the city of Norwalk had impounded the vehicle. Although it's his car, it's registered in my name. His explanation was that he had parked in a no parking zone, and the car got towed away. I told him that I did not have the ability to get an original letter of authorization to him by overnight delivery for Saturday morning. I drafted a letter and emailed it to him Friday night. The following day, my next door neighbor, who had been collecting my mail while I was away, alerted me to a certified letter that had arrived from the Department of Motor Vehicles, addressed to my son Mark. I explained the limited details I knew about Mark and the car, and said, "I'd like for you to open the letter and send me a photo of it. If you're uncomfortable with doing so, that's not a problem. I'll be home on Monday." Within 45 minutes, I learned of Mark's DUI a few days before Christmas, a refused breathalyzer test, 45 days of a driver's license suspension, and a pending court date. I burst into his apartment Tuesday morning, very angry and extremely disappointed. Not a good mix of emotions. Even though he had the requested letter of authorization from me in hand, he had not bothered to get the car released. I went from angry to livid in a second. We retrieved the car and returned to his apartment building. I told him I'd be back in the following morning to discuss the entire situation, that I was too upset and distraught to deal with it effectively now. I also knew that I'd have to find a lawyer on his behalf and have a knowledge of the next steps and options. The following day's discussion brought tears from him as he could not explain why he tried to hide the event from me, why he lied about his car and the predicament he was now in. I made it very clear to him that I would support and offer suggestions as he moved forward, but that he owned it in this situation. He was responsible and accountable for it and for working towards its resolution. I also made it very clear that he needed to consider getting further counseling in the form of AA or a psychologist or even a psychiatrist. He had a history of OCD, depression, and anxiety, and we had tried various programs and professionals over the years. I knew there had been periods of self-medicating, and I always wrestled with, are the psychological issues triggering the drinking, or does he have a drinking problem? For a youth hockey coach, losing a driver's license for 45 days is a huge obstacle to work through. 2 practices a week, games on weekends, and the occasional clinic or organizational board meetings could potentially make an Uber driver very wealthy. Mark couldn't ride a bicycle to any of the hockey-related items, or any of the hockey-related events. The distances were too far. On top of that, he would begin state-mandated classes on driving and drinking, another commute of twice a week. His brother and I could help a little, but the burden would be on Mark. 2 days after our discussion of what had happened and my suggestion that he get help, I had emergency double bypass surgery. While I knew my plaque levels were high, this emergency surgery was a shock. The fringe benefit was that the event added credence to the recent statements I had made to Mark of, while I know I've been a safety net, I know I've been an enabler, but I'm not going to be here for the rest of your life. It's high time you put yourself in a position where you can sustain yourself 24/7. My emergency heart surgery shook him. His get well card that he delivered to me in the hospital was inscribed with, "Please don't scare us again. I need you. I love you." A month later, in a lengthy text during the wee hours of a Saturday morning, he admitted to having a problem with alcohol. If it was my serious heart issue that made him realize how frail life is, that no, I really wouldn't be there for the rest of his life, well, then it was worth it. 2 months later, we toured Foundation House in Portland, Maine, a 24/7 facility for men that offers a wealth of support: clinicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, group therapy, experiential programming, not to mention life skills. He spoke with 4 or 5 30-somethings who were residents, some who had been in the program for a few months, some longer, one over 2 years. Mark felt comfortable. He came away feeling positive about all that he was exposed to, and a day later confirmed that Foundation House would be the right place for him. We still had to navigate both the court and his hockey commitment, and all the while I stressed that he owned this process. This was his decision. And every delay he threw at me for committing to a start date resulted in arguments. You've got to focus on yourself as soon as you can. Hockey will always be there, I said. He picked June 1 and confirmed it with Foundation House. June 1 arrived, and when I picked him up, and I went to pick him up for the trek to Portland, and he said he needed 2 more days. This was after he had told the court that he was starting on the 1st, and of course I went ballistic. The more upset I got, the quieter he became, just adding to my frustration. In a huff, I walked out of his apartment saying that I would be back on the 3rd at 6:30 in the morning, and hoped that he would be packed and ready to go. On the 3rd, I arrived a little after 7 in the morning and found him just getting out of bed. There was no packed bag. I asked what his plan was. He mumbled something, trudged off to the bathroom, and took a lengthy shower. Eventually, he came out, got dressed, and took a huge amount of clothes out of his dryer and began to pack. There were no words exchanged. I asked where his car key was, and he said he didn't know. There was anger in his tone. We got into the car and headed to Portland. The entire trip, we never said a word. Walking out of his building, heading to the car, I was glum, sullen, silent. He seemed angry, and my sense was that he was going to Foundation House, A, to shut me up, B, because I had demanded him to, and C, because deep down, he knew this was the next step for him. We tried many avenues of help, but 24/7 had not yet been one of them. This was the time for a drastic alternative. Just as I pulled out of the parking space, the thoughts began. Had my wife and I screwed up? Had we not reacted fast enough, effectively enough, strong enough? Were we too lax when strict discipline was needed? Did we not inspect what we expected from him? Were we guilty of the third child syndrome, when been there, done that takes a little of the edge off of parenting? There have been so many signs, most of which we reacted to. Mark claimed it was 5th grade when he began to realize he had OCD, but we really didn't see it until the 8th grade. He got treatment. We thought it was done with, but it came back. Off and on through high school, he was meeting with a psychologist. And there were the episodes of teenage drinking, one involving drinking in a car, once in a prom night luxury minivan bus, once at a school function. Each time there was punishment, which admittedly didn't last as long as threatened. After a PG year at a boarding school, his semester at college was a failure. I remember walking into his room on a Saturday morning, a room designed for 2, but there were 3 people assigned to live there. All were hockey players, and 2 were goalies, and their equipment was in the room. Not only did the room reek of stale hockey sweat, but the entire floor couldn't be seen through all of the empty beer cans and bottles. And then there were the 2 auto accidents where he ran off the road, once totaling a car and the other severely damaging it right before its lease expired. Fortunately, he was not hurt, and no police report ever cited alcohol, but his explanations always left him with doubt. How many incidents, how many clues, what should have been done? He's now 37 years old. He's demonstrated his ability to hold a job for lengthy periods of time, even prior to hockey. And over the past 2 years, he's been employed for 11 months each year. But has what we did, or more importantly, didn't do, impeded his ability to be the best he can be? Have we failed him? My eyes were glazed and stinging, and the entire trip up and back from Portland. After his admission interview and signing of the documents, one of the residents was assigned to take him food shopping. Realizing that I would be gone when he returned from his outing, he turned back to say goodbye to me. Words were few. Emotions were present. We hugged. I told him I loved him, and to be blatantly honest with himself and the counselors, and that I admired his strength in making this commitment. He said, "Thanks, love you too," and went with his new acquaintance to begin a new chapter of his life.
Time. You almost done, or?
Yes, I've got 2 paragraphs.
Okay.
The drive home was just as painful as the one up to me, rehashing all of the what-ifs. Passing a hockey rink in Marlboro brought the memory of a young AAA Mike hockey goalie, 8 years old. We were there for a tournament, and in between games, we toured Cambridge, the boathouse, and Harvard. "Wow, this place is really nice. I want to come here," is what he said. Had we failed him? As I neared home, I kept reminding myself that although the process was long and painful, it was Mark who admitted his inability to cope with alcohol. Mark who toured Foundation House. Mark who did some research on the other treatment facilities. And Mark who made this commitment. My double bypass has brought hope.
We have a couple of seconds for any comments. Wait, anybody has some?
You could feel the pain of the story by the telling of it. It was great.
Yeah, I thought it was very emotional and moving.
That's, my comment is the same as theirs.
Yeah.
You could feel the pain and struggle. What I really liked is how you went, as a parent, did I fail? Okay, and I think that was an important piece to put in there. Thank you. Hey guys, we have just a couple of seconds left as I cut the papers. So, the Connecticut Book Festival's board met the other day, and one of the truths about running a nonprofit. Oh, okay. About running a nonprofit is it costs money. And we're at that point now where Connecticut Book Festivals is now considering fundraising and collecting donations. We ask people to donate if you can, or better yet, reach out to people you know who can donate to us. We're looking for sponsors, okay? Any amount of donation is great, okay? But it's more helpful if we can get sponsors, corporations, companies, stuff like that, who are interested in authors and writing books and progressing an author's career to donate. And if you can do that, there's a QR code on the wall there, okay? Also, if you go to ConnecticutBookFestivals.com, we have a donation page, okay? Every little dollar helps. Thank you. Thank you, and we'll see you in a month. That'll be July 16th,
Yeah.
okay? Thank you, everyone. Great job.